and welcome to all viewers around the world who are joining us for the Norwich broadcast of World Speech Day 2023. I'm Ned Henderson.
And I'm Eliana Ma. Coming up in the next 2 hours, we will hear voices from around the world, from the Ukraine's call for peace to gender violence and climate change. And Ned, what else do we have?
Well, all of the speeches will come along with exclusive UEA journalism footage, and not to forget special discussions with our expert guests, Professor Alan Finlayson and Beth Dirks van Dam.
But first, let's catch up with our live reporter in UEA Newsroom, Zoe Johnson. Hi Zoe, is everything okay over there?
Hi Ned and Eliana, everything is great out here. We're incredibly excited to see the fantastic speeches we've got lined up here on World Speech Day. The theme today is Change for a Better World, and we have some fantastic speakers lined up, some incredible unexpected voices talking about everything from kindness to burnout. I can't wait to see what we've got in store. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Zoe. Now, World Speech Day is a worldwide event, giving a voice to people across multiple cultures and countries. Last year was no exception, and so to give you an idea of what this day is all about, let's have a look at some of the cities who took part in World Speech Day 2022.
Now it's time to roll out the red carpet for our special annual guest, Professor Alan Finlayson. And he was from the Department of Arts and Humanities at UEA. Alan, you joined us last year. How was that experience, and do you look forward to this year?
It was a fantastic experience. It really was an opportunity to hear all kinds of young people from all different parts of the world putting their case to the world, what they thought was good, bad, what should be done, what should be changed, what should be kept, and so forth. Really interesting, really inspiring, and I think I'm going to see the same kind of thing this year. We've got people from all over the world with speeches about difficult topics, about moving topics, about powerful topics. Couldn't be anything better from my point of view.
Well, the same to us. Let's head to our main show. Our first speech is about the war in Ukraine.
Yes, this past month marked a year since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, second-year student Katie Drake has been finding out how the war has affected the lives of millions across the country. Okay, and Katie Drake has been talking to locals of Ukraine and finding out a bit about their story during the war, and yes, we'll follow up with a quick rundown. Alan, before we watch this package, could you maybe give our audiences the insight into some of the situations that are occurring across Ukraine at the moment?
Yeah, so Ukraine's a really important issue, but also a very interesting issue from the point of view of speech making, because one of the things that's come out of the Ukraine crisis is that the world knows about Vladimir Zelensky, and they know about him in part because of his clear gifts and abilities at delivering speeches all over the world as well as in Ukraine. I think the situation in Ukraine would have played out very differently if it hadn't been for his ability right from day one of the Russian invasion to be in Kyiv, talking to his people, inspiring them and motivating them to resist the Russian invasion. Again, making the case for his country. So it's a really powerful example of how political speech making is an important part of all kinds of politics, even the kinds of crisis politics that emerge out of conflict.
Brilliant, thank you, Alan. Yes, so as we mentioned, this month has marked a year since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And again, as mentioned earlier, second-year student Katie Drake has been finding out how the war has affected millions of lives across the country of Ukraine.
Alona and her family fled to England, where they have now settled with her sister Yulia and her husband Neil. Alona lived in Lviv in Ukraine, and she describes life before England.
No one understood at that time that it is a real war. One day, the 24th of February, all was over.
I think it was my older niece who sent me a message that Russia started the war.
Alona lived in Lviv in Ukraine and describes what it was like seeing the attacks.
Yes, we saw missiles. We woke up that morning from explosions not far from our house. We didn't think about leave home, about leave country at all. We hadn't planned. We didn't know where to go. Just take a seat in our car. It was fortunately full of fuel, and we went somewhere.
The family divided after Alona's mother did not want to leave.
Proposed to my mom to join us, but she said, I will not. It is my home, it is my house. I will not.
My grandma left in Ukraine.
How do you feel about your grandmother being over there still?
Sad, because my grandma was the one closest person to me that loved me the most in the family.
Yulia, Alona's sister, says she can't even explain how overwhelmed she was seeing her home country being invaded. She says the family have settled and adjusted well, but still worry for their friends, grandmother, and the lives they left behind. Katie Drake, UEA Journalism.
That was Katie Drake. In this modern war, a part of the fight is taking place on social media. In our first speech, a Ukrainian national and UEA student, Alexei Burov, will discuss how we can combat the misinformation online.
What if I told you that as a Brit, you were actually French? How would you feel about that? What if the government of a neighbouring country was telling the world that your national identity is fake? What if that country started a war with England and then said it hadn't? That might sound ridiculous. It could never happen, right? But something like that has happened to me. My name is Alexei Burov. I was born in Kyiv, Ukraine. On the 24th February 2022, I was working on my undergraduate dissertation here in the UK when the news about Kyiv being attacked reached me. I knew immediately that my family was in direct danger. So too was my country, and not just as a nation, but also as an idea. You see, Putin says we don't exist, that there is no such thing as Ukraine and Ukrainian culture. He says we are Russians, and he doesn't call it a war. He calls it a special military operation. He says they are freeing Ukrainians from an oppressive regime. This is disinformation. It is a major battlefront in the war to protect Ukraine. And it is a threat not only to me and to Ukraine. It is a threat to you and to every Ukrainian ally too. It fuels Russian clandestine activity all over the world, including in the UK too. You have probably encountered shocking claims about Ukraine in the media. For instance, Russia has questioned the existence of a separate Ukrainian national identity. Between the 2014 occupation of Donbass and the full-scale invasion of 2022, Putin branded Ukraine as an artificial country that had been unjustly separated from Russia. The Kremlin has insisted that the majority of Ukrainians see themselves as Russians and are victims of an extremist fringe acting in the interests of outsiders. Russians believe that Ukrainians do not exist and want to persuade you of that too. The truth is that it was the Russian Empire that disintegrated the Ukrainian Cossack state and introduced ethnic-based serfdom. And it was the Soviet regime that banned the Ukrainian language, literature and folklore and repressed the Ukrainian intelligentsia. Russia also lies about its military successes. Russia would like you to think that it is winning the war it says it is not really fighting. State media trumpets every minor gain achieved by Russian troops on the ground in eastern Ukraine, even when advances are measured in meters. The truth is that Russia is losing, badly. They have changed tactics, and since October 2022, they are bombarding cities and civilian infrastructure. This is not because it gives any military advantage. It is so that the Kremlin may amplify the impact of these strikes, exaggerating the hardships of the Ukrainian civilian population to make it seem like they are winning. So, what can you and I, and all of us, do about this propaganda? You might think that a single individual can't do anything. But you can begin to build what is called information hygiene, separating the poisonous misinformation from facts. Social media is currently the front line for the Russian information war. Platforms like Twitter are overrun with Russian trolls spreading fake news or regurgitating Russian propaganda. It is to fight against these trolls that information hygiene is paramount. Diversify your sources, fact-check what you're reading, report suspicious posts online. Engage in community fact-checking if your preferred platform supports this. Debunk Russian myths when you see them online by commenting or reposting with your debunking. If Russian propagandists are allowed free rein in the information space, this will threaten the security of allied states. You can play your part in protecting your society from Russian influence. Such fact-checking and debunking can be instrumental in winning the information war that Russia has launched against Ukraine and the rest of the world. Heroic Ukrainian soldiers are fighting for freedom on the ground, while allies like you and Ukrainians abroad like me are fighting the information war in the digital space. Ukraine will win both the information war and the ground war if each of you becomes an individual fact-checker, mythbuster, and keeps challenging misleading posts on social media. I call upon each and every one of you to help us fight back against Russia in the information space. Do not let Russian propaganda machine overpower rational democratic discussion. Remember when I started, I asked how you would feel if I insisted that you were French. Well, I know that you aren't French. You are British. And I am Ukrainian. Do not let Russia persuade anyone that you do not exist. Thank you for listening. Slava Ukraini!
We would like to send our deepest sympathy to Alexei's family and Ukrainian people. It's really important to stay wisely informed in the current era. We will now join Zoe, who is with Alexei in the newsroom, to discuss his speech. Hi Zoe, are you here with us?
Hi, thanks so much for that, Eliana. I'm here with Alexei, and may I just say that was such a fascinating speech. You talk a lot about information hygiene in there and what we can all do to help. What does that look like to you?
So I'm kind of a Twitter whiz at the moment. I do a lot of sort of debunking of Russian propaganda on Twitter. I don't engage into any of the, the arguing and shouting at people. I simply repost suspicious tweets and I give context, give sources, and encourage people to do the same. That's what I'm talking about, essentially. It's not because to fight this is basically a losing game. If you start engaging with what you think is rational debate with these people, or AI in some cases, it's not going to work. They're not rational. So you have to just take matters in your own hands and just give your take without regarding the misinformation that you see, because that's how it's done in my view.
Yeah, definitely. And that can help, I think, bring some really meaningful change around as well. You've also said that in the past you've volunteered to help Ukrainian refugees. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so it all basically started in March 2022. I and a society from university helped organize, I should say, a fundraiser for Disasters Emergency Committee, where it was basically like an art evening. I read poetry there. We've also done a protest on UEA campus, same month, March 2022. And then during the summer 2022, I was working throughout the whole summer with Ukrainian refugee families in Norwich. I was teaching English as a second language in the council building, so in the library as well, in the Millennium Library. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to do a bit more of that, because it's important for me, and it's important to the people that are here.
Yeah, I'm sure it really makes a difference to people to make this feel like, you know, we support them here in the UK. So that's brilliant. We all very much enjoyed your speech. Was it the first time you've done anything like this? And how does it feel now you've seen it?
I'll start with whether it's my first time. Something like this specifically, yeah. I've not done speaking with such intent before. I've done speaking in terms of encouraging people to go into higher education. That I've done, but that I've done back home, and when I was about 17 or something. But yeah, this is a completely new experience for me, in the sense that the skills are different, the requirements are different, the speech writing techniques are different, whereas before it was sort of free form, you know. And yeah, I mean, after seeing it, it's good. I didn't expect it to turn out that well, to be honest with you, because I sometimes go too fast and slur my speech, and there could have been all sorts of things going wrong, but luckily the point was delivered.
Well, we've been really, really grateful to have you here today with us, Alexi, for World Speech Day. Got some incredible speeches to come. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Zoe, and of course thank you to Alexi. Professor Allen, what interested you about that speech?
Well, the issue of Ukraine is a big one, and a really complicated one, of course. But what Alexi did there was pick one particular theme and one issue within that: information warfare and disinformation. So he was able to focus his discussion of the larger Ukrainian issue on that particular instance, and then to give people something to do. That's quite an important part of a speech, to not just tell people some information, but also to give them something to do, to think very hard about how they might change their behaviour or think differently about a particular situation. I think he did that very powerfully. But also I think that the way he opened that speech was really interesting as well, wasn't it? That he sort of got everyone to think about themselves being in the situation that he's in. So immediately we begin to make a connection with him in our own imagination, in our experience, then gets us on the same page as him, as it were, and then thinking about, all right, here's something we can do to help this guy. So yeah, I thought that was a really powerful speech.
Brilliant. And what about this concept of disinformation circulating on social media? I mean, it's probably something that we're all aware of, but it's nonetheless quite frightening. This concept of information hygiene is fascinating. I was wondering if you could expand a bit on that.
Yeah, so disinformation is a genuine problem in contemporary political and cultural life as well, because it's just so easy for things to spread very, very quickly online before we even know that they've begun to spread, and for people quite innocently sometimes to be retweeting, recirculating or sharing information that isn't true. And sometimes it might turn out later on to be true. We know that it is not true. Other times it might take longer for us to find out and can be quite a subject of argument. So I think it's really important what Alexi is saying, that we should try and take some responsibility for ourselves and for the wider world, to be quite careful with the information that we circulate. You know, before you forward a link, at least read the article maybe, yeah? And if you read the article, think about, is this something that really can be true? How can I verify it myself? If we all take that responsibility rather than leave it to somebody else, things would be a bit better, I think.
Professor Allen, thank you.
Gender-based violence is a major issue in Norfolk, where UEA journalism has learned that every hour 4 women are attacked or sexually assaulted. Journalism student Emily Erith has been finding out how women have been learning to protect themselves.
The real world, what we can do here, we could do anything with him, when we can keep driving it until he falls on the floor.
Ishinru Jiu-Jitsu are teaching these women valuable skills to make them feel safe and confident.
Big advocate for real world techniques, you know, things that are likely to happen to you, whether you're male or female. It's absolutely a given that it should be learning techniques that hopefully will get you away from attack or unwanted attention.
self-defense classes are great for building confidence, and I'd encourage anyone to have a basic level and ability around self-defense. But it's not something that should have to be done, is it? You shouldn't have to say, actually, if you want to go out and feel safe, you need to be able to defend yourself in public. The fact is, we should be targeting all our efforts on suspect offenders, making the environment hostile for people to commit crime.
Despite police support for self-defence, the amount of women in some classes is minimal.
But we are looking at ways of trying to get more women involved. But it is very physical, it's very hands-on, it's not a sport. I think it's fair to say we're quite demanding in terms of drilling the male and female students to deal with real situations, which involves me to be very pushy and on top of them.
But for those who have joined, it has been life-changing.
Use the techniques that we've picked up here in real life. I felt a lot confident and calmer as well, so that when I am walking my dog, if I'm just out generally with the children, you know, I feel very confident in the fact that if something happened, I know exactly what to do. Like, it's almost like a little map in my brain. I could go, well, if something happened, I know I can do this, I know.
This jiu-jitsu class is teaching women the practical skills to use in realistic situations in which they may be attacked. However, this is not a preventative measure, and the British Combat Association wants to make this message clear.
Females are at risk from somebody they know in their own home or the home of the partner. Stranger danger is not the predominant risk to females.
Although there are limitations, Mia believes these skills are vital.
You know, I'm confident that if I was going to be attacked in the street, I could use my skills and I could protect myself. Yeah, and it makes me feel more confident, you know, as a woman going out, that if something was going to happen, that I'd be able to keep myself safe.
Emily Erith, UEA Journalism.
That was Emily Erith. For thousands of women across the world, gender-based violence is an ever-present threat. In our next speech, Hannah Bereznak speaks on what we can do to make a change.
I'm here to address a critical issue that has plagued our society for far too long: gender-based violence. It is a tragedy that in the 21st century we still see countless incidents of women and girls being subjected to violence, harassment, and discrimination solely because of their gender. These actions not only inflict physical and psychological trauma on the victims, but also perpetuate a cycle of fear and insecurity that has far-reaching impacts on our communities and societies as a whole. Violence against women is a global crisis that affects millions of women and girls every day. It is a pervasive problem that crosses all borders, all cultures, and all socio-economic levels. The scale of this problem is staggering, with an estimated 1 in 3 women worldwide experiencing some form of gender-based violence in their lifetime. This means that every day thousands of women are subjected to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, often of the hands of those closest to them. This is unacceptable, and it is our collective responsibility to stand up and speak out against it. The consequences of violence against women are far-reaching and devastating. Women who experience violence are almost twice as likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. They are also at a high risk of developing chronic health conditions. The impact of violence on women and their families can last for generations, perpetuate a cycle of trauma and suffering that is difficult to break. Despite the magnitude of this problem, violence against women is still largely ignored, minimized, or even accepted as a normal part of life. The silence surrounding this issue must be broken. We must stand in solidarity with survivors, and we must challenge the attitudes and behaviors that enable this violence to continue. We need to acknowledge that gender-based violence is not just a woman's issue. It is a human rights issue that affects everyone in our society. Just imagine, every 30 seconds, the police receive a call for help relating to gender-based violence. In the 5 minutes that I have been speaking, at least 10 women are experiencing some sort of abuse. And that's just the ones who were able to call, who were able to speak, who were able to break the silence. But what about those who we don't hear about? We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to this issue any longer. We must acknowledge, we must act, and we must act now. If you suspect that someone close to you is being abused, start simple. Talk to them, express your concerns, listen actively. Let the person know that they are not alone and that you are willing to help in any way you can. Provide them with information about support groups and helplines. If the abuse is ongoing, serious, or life-threatening, consider reporting it to the authorities. This could include calling emergency service or contacting the police. The time for silence is over. We need to stand in solidarity with survivors. We need to break a cycle of trauma and suffering that can last for generations and create a society where everyone can live free from violence and discrimination. Let us be the change we wish to see in the world. Thank you.
That was Hannah Bereziuk. What a powerful and emotional speech on a very prominent issue in today's society. We will now join Zoe, who is with Hannah in the newsroom, to discuss her speech.
Thanks so much for that, Ned. Hannah, I've got to say, I found your speech incredibly moving, especially the last bit. The delivery of that message was, very poignant. What inspired you to write and perform such a meaningful and inspirational speech?
Thank you a lot for your comments, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak out about this really meaningful issue. And the main point for me is to raise awareness that it's really an issue and to say what we can do to prevent this issue to occur, and we can create a safe world, but we need to know what to do and how to do it. It's also to make changes in social and political world, to help people and to help survivors to break the silence and to break the cycle of trauma, and to help people stand up and speak out against the problem and against the issue.
It's so important. And what can we do as people to show solidarity for survivors of people that have been through this?
The most important part is just to listen to person and just to say that you are here to help and you are here to listen and you're here to talk. And then you can provide with the help and you can provide with the information, with the sources and with the resources if they want to change something. And it's really important to person really want to change something, and you cannot do anything if person don't want, but you need to listen and you need to help person understand they really need to help.
That's fantastic. And we talk a lot about gender-based violence. What can men in particular do to help those that are affected?
The most important fact is to understand that gender-based violence is not only women issue, it's like human rights issue. And if men can support women, if he feels that something go wrong, it can also be like the general thing: talk, speak, listen, and provide with the help.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's been brilliant to hear from you about the things that we can all do to help support those that have been affected. What a fantastic speech. I know we've got plenty more to come, but for now, back to you guys in the studio to continue with World Speech Day.
Well, thank you, Zoe and Hannah. Professor Alan, how big an impact does gender-based violence have on women and young girls?
Well, I think as Hannah explained very clearly in her excellent speech there, that the impact isn't just the immediate impact of causing harm on someone, it's also a way of controlling people, of exercising power over them, and it can have an effect on people who are perhaps not the direct victim of that violence, but who suffer from the climate of fear that generates and that spreads, so that people don't feel able to act and express themselves freely because they're afraid of the threat of violence. I think that's a really important point that Hannah was making in her speech, and that's also part of what made her speech so excellent, because she was talking about the way in which maybe we don't sometimes talk about these kinds of issues. We might think it's depressing or distasteful or something like that, but actually bringing these things forward and talking about these things openly is a very important part of changing situations, of enabling people to think about them better and to resist them. And I also thought it was very interesting how, just like in our first speech from Alexei, Hannah was giving people who listened to the speech something to do. You weren't just passive recipients to the information she was giving us. She was saying, right, you can now go out and you can help people, you can support people, you should be part of the process of solving this problematic situation. So talking about things, can't do everything, but it's one of the ways in which we can push back against some issues, and certainly issues about where silence has been part of what has allowed these things to go out of control.
Well, it's clearly very important for young girls to learn self-defense as well. So can we come to the next topic, Ned?
Yeah, absolutely, Eliana. The recent census found that Norfolk is one of the most LGBT plus friendly places in the country. UEA journalism student Lily Bogue has been finding out about the people behind these statistics.
I miss it. I'm around my people, and that is reflected through the atmosphere of the city. You've got pubs, clubs and bars that are really friendly, and there's things that kind of building up around the city that create even more of a community feeling. It makes me love Norwich.
I've had really positive experiences here. I've come from London originally, so I have that to kind of compare it to, and I'd say they're both on par with each other. I felt very safe and accepted. It's where I've had a lot of my big moments in terms of my coming out and creating queer events and queer spaces. Because I remember when I first looked at the map, and obviously these spots you expect, London is quite dark blue, Brighton, and then I saw a little dot and I was like, well, I know that's Norwich because that's the only place in Norfolk that's going to have that.
Also found that Norwich has got one of the highest populations of trans and non-binary people in the country. I know of a couple trans friends that have had like dirty looks or even comments from people just passing by. But I think in comparison to some other cities, there's slightly less of that.
There's a very big issue within Norwich and Norfolk as a wider kind of community with transphobia. We should be continuing to educate about just accepting different lifestyles in general, but also as well just having education that is gender inclusive, that is sexuality inclusive. Help to amplify the voices of queer people, continue to educate yourselves on queer struggles, and continue to just be an effective ally.
For some LGBT plus people, coming out can put them in danger. In this speech, Romain Bayen will talk about how many LGBT plus people are still fighting for their right to live as themselves.
Does the name of Brianna J. ring a bell to you? For those of you who don't know her, she was a transgender young girl brutally murdered on the 11th of February of this year in Cheshire. She was stabbed for being transgender in England. Not in some dangerous country, not during the old time, she was murdered here in England in 2023. Who says you're safe if you live in a European country as a member of the LGBTQ+ community? The truth is, LGBTQ+ people don't have the same right as heterosexual people regarding safety. They can't travel in certain countries, they can even be sentenced to death in some of them. Flogging and stoning LGBTQ+ people became legal after Brunei enacted the law in April 2019. You can find the same law in other countries such as Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan and Iran. Due to all this danger, a website called LGBTQ+ Travel Safety Index was created. The website lists 203 countries from the most welcoming to the most dangerous for LGBT people. Here are their findings. Canada is first place and Brunei last place. However, there are some surprising figures. For instance, Chile is 14th in the ranking, just above Australia and Denmark, considering Chile is still a developing country and is known, like other countries in South America, to be very dangerous for LGBT people. So the belief that Latino countries are more dangerous than European countries can be false for certain countries. However, people are still arguing that there is less danger in European countries for the LGBTQ+ community. Let me tell you that is not true. The European region of the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association, the ILGA Europe, have reported an increase in the frequency and intensity of violence acts against the LGBTQ+ community. This report takes into account data from January to December 2022 in 54 countries, located in Europe and Asia. The association has found that hate speech towards LGBTQI+ people has peaked around gay pride in Austria and France by political leaders in Georgia, Moldova, Montenegro and Serbia. But wait, this is only the beginning. Not only is there more violence towards the LGBTQ+ community, but these acts are becoming more aggressive. According to the report, 2022 was the most violent year for LGBTQI+ people. The ILGA Europe has been collecting data on the safety of LGBTQ+ community for these past 12 years. In the past decade, 2022 was the deadliest year when you would think we are more open-minded in this day and age. Some of you dare to say that there is nothing left to fight for, that all the work is done and finished, or that this topic is being exaggerated. But all this evidence has clearly proven that it is still a prevalent issue. So I'm calling upon everyone to stand up. Don't ignore the fact, face them, rise up, fight, do something. This applies to everyone regardless of who you are, because safety is a fundamental human right. No one should have to renounce their safety just because of who they love or who they are. The fight is not over. Far from it. It is happening here, it is happening there, it is happening everywhere. We need to put an end to this.
Thank you, Romain, for stand up for such an important topic. Let's go to Zoe again in the newsroom, who is with Romain.
Thank you so much, Eliana. I'm here with Roman, and we've been talking about World Speech Day. What's it been like for you being part of this event?
It was totally new for me. I never experienced something like that, and I really enjoy it, writing the speech, doing it, recording it. It was totally new, and I really like it.
Is it the first time you've done anything like this before?
Yes, I think so. I'm more of a literature person, so in the past I did a lot of writing some text, essay, but never speech.
That's fantastic. The theme of this World Speech Day is change for a better world. What kind of changes do you think we need to see to make the world a safer place for LGBTQ+ people?
I think people need to acknowledge what is going on around the world, because this is still a taboo, something that people won't talk about it, or maybe would just say it's nothing important, and so we first need to acknowledge that, then maybe speak about that, raise awareness, and I think last and more important thing is to do some things, and the only way of changing things is doing some law or taking defense for these people in the government, inside the government, and doing some big changes. This is not something that only people like us will change. Of course, change will come from us, but in the end, it's only to the people like politicians and diverse people that can make change happen.
Those are really powerful words. Thank you so much, Roman, for being with us today and for your fantastic speech. We've got loads more to come here at World Speech Day at UEA. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Zoe, and thank you especially to Roman. Professor Allen, what are our next steps in the fight for LGBT rights, and how did Roman express that in her speech?
Well, I'm not sure I can express it better than Romain did, actually. I think what she said was very clear and very true, that it's too easy, I think she made this point very well, to think that, an issue is sorted, we don't need to worry about it anymore, nothing more to be done. So in the first step is you have to keep eternal vigilance, as the saying goes, to check that people's rights are being respected, not rolled back. And in fact, there are clearly challenges to the rights of LGBT+ people in a number of different countries at the moment. But she's also making the point about this being an international issue. It's not just about the country one lives in. There's also questions about how we can internationally address these issues. And what she did was explain that very clearly to us, take us through different examples, and end with that very rousing call for people to be conscious and aware and paying attention to the issue and what can be done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Project Change is a UEA initiative to teach young people about what they can do to help fight climate change. UEA journalism student Zoe Johnson has been finding out about another inspirational project.
Action against climate change comes in many different forms.
Show me what democracy looks like!
Some people fight for what they believe in. Others take a different approach. Artist Gennady Ivanov believes his paintbrush wields the most power. He spent 4 years painting a climate change mural, which now hangs in the council chamber at Norwich City Hall.
The idea was to bring people the truth, really, via visual art, via emotions, what people can see. Because I was kind of semi-denier, like many people in UK, about climate change. People don't believe because it's nice weather. So I start asking questions, read articles, and also as a migrant I was shocked to see it on the beach, parts of the houses which people losing for nothing, and I realized it's climate change.
The painting, entitled A Climate Mural for Our Times, celebrates the 50th anniversary of the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. Elsewhere on campus, Dr. Rupert Reed has harnessed the power of words to inspire change. Alongside award-winning filmmakers Franny Armstrong and Martin Pick, Dr. Reid received a £10,000 grant from UEA Impact to create a short film about the climate breakdown called Out of the Ashes.
We've put too much pressure on the living systems on which we depend. The house of cards is starting to fall. And so, like so many before it, our civilization is unraveling.
I want to enable people to imagine the future. So I guess what I want people to feel is disturbed. It's not really though about what I want them to feel even. It's about what I think you cannot avoid feeling if you actually allow yourself to watch and hear and feel this kind of thing with open eyes. So it's the whole caboodle then, isn't it? It's grief, it's horror, it's fear, possibly anger. And then, of course, as we move forward to the end of the film, hopefully some of that transmutes into a kind of energy, into determination, maybe into a little bit of joy, certainly a kind of potential active hope. So if we think about the film, I hope that people will be motivated by those difficult emotions of terror, maybe, or deep sadness that get triggered by it, as well as motivated by the kind of appeals and the positivity and the determination towards the end.
Dr. Reid hopes the film will help people imagine what the future could be like, depending on what is done to fight the climate crisis.
We are now joined in the studio by Beth Dirks van Dam, who we'll be speaking to after this next speech about Project Change. Now, as part of Project Change, students from Norwich schools prepared speeches on what changes they can make. Our next speech comes from Year 10 student Pallavi Shastri, who has been talking about food waste.
Have we gone bananas with food waste? We've all seen yellow bananas, perfectly wrapped in its plastic packaging, bought it, driven home, and even if there is the tiniest bit of brown or bruise, it goes straight in the bin. Does this look like a perfect banana? Is it edible? Some people throw it away with just this tiny bit of brown. The fact is that nowadays people, especially in the UK, eat with their eyes is the largest contributor to household food waste. This banana has come all the way from Ecuador. It's gone through processes at farms, transportation and retail to get to your fruit bowl. But what we throw away in homes only account to a tiny percentage of the total food waste, and it is still our fault. Across the production line, food is specifically designed to suit our cosmetic needs to look so-called perfect. There are artificial preservatives to maintain colour on fruits and veg so that we think it looks good, such as wax sprays on apples so that customers are satisfied. Maybe you're thinking, what's the problem? What's the deal with food? Surely there are bigger issues. I say we tackle things that we can do first. Food waste impacts energy waste, water waste, increases the rate of global warming as food is constantly dumped on the garbage pile for not looking perfect. But what is perfect? What's your problem with a wonky carrot? What's your problem with a less red pepper? What's your problem with a misshapen strawberry? In the few minutes that I've been speaking, nearly 3,000 bananas have been wasted in the UK alone. Mostly, there are bananas that are fine to eat, like this. If you find that you have a banana that you don't want to eat, maybe make a milkshake or banana bread. Be creative with foods and you will enjoy it more, waste less, and help our planet survive. I call upon everyone to spread the message that one small way that everyone can do to reduce global warming, we need to change our mindset.
food waste is certainly not any less important than other environmental problems. As an international student, I'm personally fascinated by how regularly people here ask about the weather every day. Ned, should I ask you the same question? How do you feel about the weather today?
Well, Eliana, certainly not as warm as it is back in your home country of Vietnam.
Yeah, I can see that and you can tell that after a while living here. Yeah, I can't agree more with that. We are now joined by Beth Lux Van Dam, who worked with Project Change. Beth, could you share with us what has the Project Change done so far?
Well, Project Change actually was a project from the university around the COP26 agenda. And as you saw with Professor Rupert Reed, a lot of people are like anxious and about climate change is a fact and people want to do something about it. And of course you've got the Fridays for the Future, there's the Fridays strike action for the future. So young people want to do something and they want to do something to reduce their anxiety. So one of the things we did is we organised a speech competition to get young people's view on what they could do with regards to climate change. And we gave them lessons. We used this booklet, which is available online. If you look at UEA, Dare to Speak Up speech competition, you've got those resources. And it takes young people through the steps of making a speech. And people, if you sort of say, do you want to do something about climate change? They think, oh yeah, we need to write to world leaders, we need to do things. But we always ask, in your speech, who do you direct your speech to? What action do you want to see as a result of your speech? And I have sugar dips and I always have a banana in my bag. And I talked to this lady and I said, well, it could be as simple as talking about food waste. And it totally clicked with her. And her speech is an absolute perfect example of how something simple one can do to change the behavior and to contribute to climate change. So we do speech competitions, but we also through outreach, we go into school because the university is a civic university. So we do the outreach, but also we are at festivals. So we go to the Latitude Festival, and then you often don't have video things to give people ideas about what speeches could be like. So we've developed this booklet together with Professor Ellen Verlezen. And if you go step by step through this booklet, you will be able to make a speech. And all the people who've been speaking here, we've used the booklet. And the person you're talking to later, Chloe, this idea of speech competitions came into place at the university because I lead the Future Leaders. And an important skill for people is to be able to speak up about matters important to them, to enable to lead on change, and public speaking is really, really important. So we do continue with speech training at the UEA, and we hope that more people are speaking up because the decisions being made today are affecting future generations. So we do need for young people to take action.
Yeah, thank you so much for that fascinating insight into Project Change. Let's go live now to Zoe, who is in our newsroom, speaking to Chloe, another member of Project Change. Zoe, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Ned. We've been hearing a lot today about the amazing things that go into making these speeches, and part of that is the Future Leaders Project. I'm here with Chloe, and she's going to tell me a little bit more about that.
So the Future Leaders Project is organised by one of the lecturers at UEA, and it's an extracurricular project where we all come together from all different degrees and backgrounds, and we all talk about leadership qualities and talk about what makes a good speech and what makes a good leader.
That's fantastic. And what do you think are some of the things you've learned about how to make a good speech?
So we've learnt some really good skills with confidence, talking in public, and writing a good speech when it comes to structure, content, engaging the audience and having really good ideas and putting them through, whether it's with storytelling, poems, or persuading the audience.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you've got some great speeches to come. Do you have anything in mind that you'd love to give a speech about in the future?
So my speech would be about the importance of language learning, especially here in the UK after Brexit and COVID, that I think language learning is still very important, especially with globalisation.
That sounds fantastic. I'd certainly love to learn another language, so I can't wait to hear your speech one day. Thanks so much, Chloe. Back to you guys in the studio for more World Speech Day content.
Thank you, Zoe. Now, burnout affects millions of people each year, with one study finding that over 50% of adults had at one point struggled with burnout. Key causes are long hours, lack of adequate pay, two issues also cited as reason why many industries have been striking. But for some overworked people, striking isn't an option, as UEA student Charlotte Gullick has been finding out.
Angel Webb is a high-level teaching assistant at Edith Cavell Primary School in Norwich. Despite being eager to strike, she simply can't. She has been a member of the National Education Union since September, but did not receive her ballot paper in time.
So I didn't actually vote because I didn't get my ballot paper, but I didn't really realise that there was voting going on for teachers and support staff. So I don't know if that's like lack of their advertising or I'm just not really in the loop, but I didn't vote.
During strike days, support staff at Edith Cavell have been left to their own devices. Overworked and undervalued at the best of times, their staff have had enough, but there's nothing that they can do. And it's taking a toll on their mental health.
So because my role as HLTA is a bit different to a normal TA, I would be expected to like lead the class, do all of the stuff that the teacher would normally do, but me instead. So it does make me feel anxious because I know that I know that TAs can do what the teachers' jobs are, but I think some schools are so under pressure to like stay open and stay running and try and not make it affect them at all, but like it is a strike and it will affect schools in some way, and if they had to close then that would just show that like the effect of what's actually going on.
In England, the ballot result of support staff saw 84% of members vote yes on a turnout of almost 47%. This result, despite being overwhelmingly in favour of action, just missed the government's threshold of 50%. Caitlin Mason has been a teaching assistant at the same school as Angel since September and has found herself in a similar situation.
So we were expected to go to work as normal, and basically for the children who were in, so that was mostly sort of vulnerable children, children with additional needs, we just had a normal school day for them really, looked after them, did lessons with them. It's not great. Last time I sort of made a bit of a plan, but it doesn't make you feel great because you sort of feel like it's a bit unfair because you still go to work, you still spend a lot of time with the kids. You're obviously not doing the same level as planning and everything as a teacher, but there's still a lot of the sort of unfair things that the teachers are campaigning against that affect the TAs as well, yet we still, like, there's no strike for us, so we're still going in, there's nothing to back us. If we strike for that day, like, we could lose our jobs.
But what will it take for them to get their say? This is just one primary school in Norfolk, but a symptom of a much deeper issue. In the words of the NEU, our education system is in crisis, and despite mentions of a second ballot being issued for support staff, Angel and Caitlin haven't heard anything yet. Charlotte Gullick, UEA Journalism.
Charlotte has also been talking to Rachel Emerson, an NHS union spokesperson who recently discussed her experience with burnout on ITV Anglia.
So I don't know, I haven't researched a lot about burnout itself, but I can sort of tell you how I feel, and I think it's a feeling of emotions overwhelming you sometimes when you don't expect it. So you manage, you cope, you do your job. It does seem quite daunting a lot of the time because it's tiring and challenging. But then I feel burnout is when I unexplainedly just want to burst into tears and sort of go away and hide. That's about it, really.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. I think the mental and emotional side of burnout, I think when you hear the word burnout, sometimes it can be very easy to think, oh, it's just being tired physically and wanting to go to sleep. But really, it can be that mental an emotional thing for a lot of people. Would you say for you it is more of an emotional thing rather than a physical?
Yeah, I think physically I'm pretty strong. I do get tired, but I think the most the biggest way it affects me is just the constant feeling that I've got to carry on, I've got to do this, and then I don't actually want to do it anymore, but I'm still mixed emotions with that as well, because I know I am a good nurse and I make a difference, and so you don't want to stop doing that, and a lot of people rely on you, both patients and your colleagues, but I think it's just that feeling of you want to get off the merry-go-round for a bit.
Do you think that more needs to be done to combat burnout and that overwhelm, like the feeling of being overwhelmed? Do you think that if there was something that you think could be done to help combat it, what do you think that would be?
I think mental health services are key, and we know that, there are mental health services available, but they're not available enough. So at the Norfolk and Norwich, there's a good occupational health team, and you'll refer a member of staff who's feeling particularly stressed and overwhelmed to them, and they'll come back with all these websites and counselling sources and things that are available, but then when the person tries to access them, there's a 6-month wait or longer, and then you think, well, how on earth is that going to help that person when they actually need it? Probably now or tomorrow.
And for yourself and your experiences of burnout and when you've been overwhelmed with work and finding a work-life balance, what are the key things that you do to try and look after yourself and help yourself in those situations? Because I think in order to help other people and help your team and keep everyone encouraged, you have to look after yourself first.
Completely, absolutely. And actually, it's something that I've been saying to my colleagues for a long time. If you can't look after yourself, you can't really look after other people. But I'm the biggest failure in that, because
it's hard.
It's really hard to think, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop and look after myself, because then you have the guilt factor. And I think that's a huge thing, in particularly in nursing teams, that they feel guilty when they do take time out to look after themselves, because they think, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be looking after. But I think the biggest support I get is from my colleagues, and from patients too, because patients generally constantly give back to you the kind of things you emotionally want to hear, oh, you're doing a great job, or thank you so much for looking after me, you've made a real difference. All those things make you feel, a little bit of nutrients back in your body. Mentally, yeah.
Our next speech comes from Mikolai Atzinzu, who will speak about how he has been impacted by burnout and what we can do to combat it.
Work more and you will achieve success. Work on the weekends and your boss will appreciate you more. Work for your future now. Do a lot. Be productive and you will succeed. But what if your body says no, and to keep going but keep doing is no longer an option? What if you hit a brick wall and burn out? In a recent study conducted by Microsoft, polling 20,000 people from 11 countries, it was found that almost 50% of employees said that they were burned out at work. This is a staggering statistics that show that it's a real problem that can have serious consequences, both for individuals and organizations. Burnout is not just about feeling tired or stressed. It's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. Prevention here is way better than cure. Why? And why do I want to raise the issue with you? My last year at high school was really hard. I had to prepare for the final exam so I could get into university and move to another city. I worked very hard and succeeded by being accepted into the best IT university in Belarus. My dream came true. I was super happy and I started my new life in a new city. 2 years passed and I started to feel that I had to push myself for every assignment. I simply did not have any energy. I got very stressed as I was so scared to get expelled. Then at one point I realized I could not push myself anymore and that I needed to do something about this. I couldn't find any motivation to keep going, and I hated the future perspective, and I feared I was not going to achieve anything by keep going this way. That's when I decided to find out what was going on with me, and I found a lot of courses and books that describe burnout, the different stages and steps to cope with it, and how to get on track. I decided to change university and change my study program, and realized that I did just in time, as I could have spiraled down to real burnout. I hereby would like to share with you what I've learned to become aware of the various burnout stages to help you to take the right actions before it gets bad. My name is Mikolai, I'm 22 years old, and I will talk about burnout. Imagine feeling complete emotional and physical exhaustion. You simply have no strength to do anything. Even the simplest tasks require incredible effort. You slide down to the level of basic routine actions. You live on autopilot. Work, surroundings, and life in general are overwhelming. What I'm describing here is the fourth and the final stage of burnout. At this stage, the only way out is to seek immediate professional help, because prolonged stress can cause irreparable damage to the brain, not to mention the body as a whole. But I hope that by taking you through the stages leading up to this, you will have 3 chances to be able to recognize and prevent getting there. At stage 1, we can be over-optimistic. It could be that you set unrealistic goals and overload yourself without realizing it. Researchers suggest that at this stage, if we should focus on mindfulness practice, like paying attention to the beauty of nature, our breathing, taste of food, smells, and sounds. Reducing the flow of incoming information by spending at least 2 hours per day offline will also help to calm down the security department of the brain. The second stage is the innovator stage, where we start looking for new ways and methods to escape from reality, more work, new courses, and a strong desire to be productive. Coping with this stage, which are advised there, do not take on new projects. This desire has nothing to do with the desire to grow and develop, but it's an attempt to escape from reality. Arrange a 24-hour digital detox. No electronic devices, ideally a walk in nature or a massage. Finally, the third stage is the prosecutor stage, which usually occurs 2 to 3 months after the first signs of burnout. You start blaming others for your problems and could start avoiding people because their successes and positivities are annoying to you. Simple jealousy gives you a short-term burst of energy. And to cope with this stage, you need to put all focus on maintaining basic activities, spend time with your native tribe, your family or good friends, and do something with your hands. Cook, get a coloring book, origami, sewing, or anything you like to do with hands. These steps look very simple, but you need to remember that consistency is the key. The process of burning out is not a one-day thing, and the cure takes some time too. Recognize the signs. Do your own reading and find out about what would work best for you. Ignoring the signals are not a good option. Positive change can happen as long as you are prepared to face reality and take the action needed to relight your fire. And remember, prevention is better than cure, so think about yourself first.
Well, what a fascinating speech from Mikolai then. I don't know about you two, but I could certainly relate to some of the issues of burnout that he was addressing there. Now we're going to join Zoe in the newsroom, who is with Mikolai now, and he's going to discuss his speech with her. Over to you, Zoe.
Thanks so much, Ned. Yeah, we were just saying how relatable was that speech. I'm sure many of us can think of times where we've felt like that as well. Because it's so relatable, why do you think it's important that we're talking about this issue right now?
I think it's important to talk about not even right now, but in all of our times. But especially right now, we are facing some kind of a shift from working like with our hands to working with our brain. And since we have this 8-hour shift during the day, we are kind of stuck in this problem that our brain can work only can be focused around 4 hours per day, like straight, and then it goes down and down. That's why I think that it's important to raise the question, raise the awareness of burnout, because we are not prepared for some kind of a work like this.
Definitely. And you say that prevention is better than a cure. What do you think universities and workplaces around the world could do to help address the problem of burnout?
I think the most important is to raise awareness and also, as I see right now what's going on in the University of East Anglia, there's a great example how you can manage and how you can treat students who can have problems like this, like burnout or other mental health issues. So talking about maybe employees, I would say, as I heard, that 4-day week is really great example, and it shows probably in the UK they make some kind of trial. So it's a great start to think about their employees and raise this question more often.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Mikolai. It's such an important issue and it's great to be talking about it today here at World Speech Day here in UEA. Back to the studio, guys.
Thank you, Zoe and Mikolai. Cycling is a fun and eco-friendly way to get around, but not every city has the infrastructure it needs to support safe cycling. UEA journalism student Rory McRellis has been finding out what's changing for cyclists here in Norwich.
I'm cycling down Newmarket Road, one of the most dangerous places in the city for cycling. Now this is mainly because the street experiences high volumes of traffic during rush hour, and there is only a cycle lane on one side of the road. It was back in November when the public were consulted about changes to be made to cycle infrastructure, but it wasn't until January that the official proposal was discussed by the council. Following the meeting, however, it seems that alterations to the plan are already being made.
So the chair of the committee asked for an amendment to the scheme which involved reinstating the 2 bus stops onto the road, and one of those would therefore be in the proposed new cycle lane.
According to Peter, one way to solve this issue is to build cycle lanes around the bus stops to create an island, like the one seen here. However, this would involve cutting into the road, which could lead to further problems.
At the end of the day, people are only going to cycle if it's made easy and it's made comfortable. And so we have to look at the various ways that our cities have been designed around the car and prioritized for car traffic, and start, rebalancing the scales, if you will, to make the right choice the easy choice. And so, of course, that involves putting cycling infrastructure on the ground, dedicated cycle tracks, protected intersections and roundabouts, cycle-friendly streets, but it also requires disincentivizing driving a little bit.
Here in Norfolk, carbon-cutting transport schemes are set to rise, with an £133 million budget for highways and transport, representing a £29 million increase since last year. Councillor Graham Plant, Cabinet Member for Highways, Infrastructure and Transport, said that cutting carbon continues to be a key focus for the highways and transport budget. In a council meeting held on the 6th of March, part of the proposed Highways Capital Improvements Programme included additional funding of £720,000 for cycling infrastructure improvements on Newmarket Road.
One thing that Dutch cities have done remarkably well is this carrot and stick approach. They make cycling very attractive, but they also make driving a little bit inconvenient and indirect. And so it's not a coincidence that it's cycling is the dominant mode share in over 200 cities and towns here in the Netherlands. It's because it's been made that way through the infrastructure, through the policy, and then a culture is developed where cycling is no more remarkable than hoovering your floor or brushing your teeth.
While this culture seems a little way away from being accepted here in the city, it seems that these latest developments might indeed get more people in Norwich on their bikes. Roy McGrellis, UEA Journalism.
What a fantastic package from Roy McGrellis there. In our next speech, Marsha Binti Maiden discusses the importance of proper cycling infrastructure and how getting on a bike would help save the world.
How did you all get to where you are today? Was it in the car or the bus, surrounded by fumes and stuck in traffic? Were you confined in a pollution-producing prison? Perhaps trying to tune out your dad's ongoing rant on car maintenance costs and rising fuel prices? Wouldn't it be more enjoyable to be able to admire nature on your journey? To appreciate the smell and breeze of cleaner air through a bike ride? Maybe even stop by a local cafe for a fresh scone? Perhaps it's time to reconsider going from 4 wheels back to 2. Brunei, a small island paradise where I'm from, lies in the heart of Southeast Asia. Through its warm temperatures, tropical greenery is bound to be seen through every window of the country. We are truly privileged to be surrounded by the sea, lush environments, and well-maintained parks. But this paradise is being destroyed by cars. In Brunei, car dependency is shockingly high. There are about 700 cars per 1,000 people, one of the highest car ownership rates in the world. Without the availability of alternative modes of transportation or even proper cycling routes in place, it is difficult for people to adjust to cycling as an environmentally friendly practice. Brunei and other nations over-reliant on automobiles are missing out on the plethora of positive health, economic, and ecological impacts. It is possible to change, whether in Brunei or the UK, by pursuing policies that promote cycle tourism. In Holland, for example, cycling strategies have proven to be a great benefit to the economy. Overall population health has also improved through cycling. Cycle tourism alone supports 500,000 jobs across Europe. Moreover, research has shown riding a bike has less carbon footprint than walking, using the bus, and driving. This is a growing industry that we cannot ignore any longer. It is a win-win solution for cities worldwide. Investing in cycling projects is a path to sustainability and offsetting the issues of urban sprawl. Ultimately, developing suitable infrastructures and policies to promote cycling would make your journeys just as easy, convenient, and accessible as public transport. Even yet, you get the added bonuses of health, social synergy, cost-effective maintenance, and profit in local economies, and environmental security. We can build a more livable, sustainable, and cyclable future. Recently, the UK government has also initiated a £200 million funding investment for developing cycling routes. The UK can follow the Dutch example by investing in cycling infrastructure, creating a cycling-friendly culture, and subsequently providing an opportunity for tourists to appreciate historical attractions with a bike ride. Yes, using the car can seem easier. Yes, it can feel more convenient. And yes, the bus is accessible. But there is so much more to traveling around than ease, convenience, and access. If you cycle, not only your personal well-being of safety and health is being improved, but rural towns will also be regenerated, boosting local economies, all the while lowering CO2 emissions on every trip you take. We as humans have been so accustomed to these degrading modes of transport. It is up to us to challenge ourselves and abandon the highways. So I say, jump on the bandwagon and get on your bike.
Well, I must be honest that whenever I ride a bike, it feels so refreshed and real-lived. But just be aware that whenever you ride a bike, just be aware of your safety on the street. We will now join Zoe, who is with Marisa in the newsroom, to discuss her speech.
Thanks, Eliana, and let's just reiterate, it is always important to keep your safety in mind while on the bike and always wear a helmet. But I'm joined here with Marsha, and I just have to say I found your speech so interesting, and it's a very unusual topic to write a speech about. What inspired you to write a speech about cycling?
So for this year's one of my module, I am taking parliamentary and public policy research. So I was inclined to do more research on cycling. So as part of this module, I'm taking a trip to the Netherlands next month to learn more about cycling. And I feel like it's a really important matter because back at home, the only places I could cycle were around the neighborhood, and even then you can't really go anywhere with your bike. So I think by implementing safer infrastructures and using the bike is a more sustainable way to travel.
That's really interesting, really important. Do you like to cycle much yourself?
Not much here, but I think with better infrastructure and maybe even places like the doctor bike sessions that can help maintain bikes, that would be more helpful for me to take up on cycling. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Marsha. It certainly made me want to get out and about on the bike. We've got still so many more amazing speeches to come here on World Speech Day. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Zoe and Marsha. Professor Allen, welcome back. Did that inspire you to get on your bike?
Absolutely, especially to get on my bike in Brunei. If the university or journalism programme would like to send me out to Brunei to record a package on cycling and the island paradise that she described, I'd be more than happy to do that. And also, I think, as she was just saying in the interview there, also an important policy issue. Actually, a really important thing to think about in politics, that there's quite a lot of arguments and disputes about transport right now, especially in this country, about trains not being on time and being too busy, about buses not working, people worried about car usage and the cost of fuel. So properly thinking about transport policy with all those options and putting cycling at the heart of it, that seems to me like a pretty good policy idea as well.
Very good policy idea indeed. Now, moving on. Kindness is the best cure, or so the saying goes. And for students who have been using UEA's newest service, the Warren, it seems to be true. Jessica Gibbs has been finding out more.
Students' wellbeing is always topical. Here at the University of East Anglia, I want to know whether students feel like their mental health and wellbeing is being supported. Behind me is a new facility called the Warren, which is a dedicated safe space for students. With the recent resignation of Vice-Chancellor David Richardson, it will be interesting to see how this new space supports its students. Full-time, and it was a lot of work, and I also needed a part-time job on the side as well because it can be quite expensive to fund as well. With the cost of living crisis, it's quite a lot. Last year I found it so tough, so in my first semester I was suffering really badly and got diagnosed with depression, and it really showed in my ability to work and sort of come to lectures. And that kind of set me back, especially with my dissertation. Whereas this year, I experienced that in my first semester, but it was a lot more manageable, and I knew that, okay, I've only got 2 essays due, that's all right, you've got time to work on them. And I reminded myself that compared to the course of the rest of the year, that's probably the most intense it's going to be for me. So that did make it a lot easier.
But can kindness change the world? Rory McRellis has thought so, and in our next speech, he will tell us how.
Yawning. It's contagious. If one person in the room yawns, everybody starts yawning. It's an involuntary reaction. We can't control it. But what if I told you kindness can be contagious too? Not only by doing good deeds, but by also spreading an ideology that could fundamentally change the world. It doesn't have to be grand or elaborate to make a significant impact. It can be as simple as a compliment, a small act of generosity. These small gestures can go on to create a ripple effect that travels far beyond our initial expectations, touching countless lives and inspiring them to perpetuate further acts of compassion. And it all starts with a smile. But what is kindness? And is it something that can be taught to others? It is often defined as being friendly, generous and considerate, but I feel true kindness is a quality that we keep deep within ourselves, a desire to help others not only when it's easy, but also when it is hard. Kindness is leading by example, and not just about making ourselves feel good, or improving our own lives. It's about recognizing the humanity in others, connecting with people on a deep and meaningful level, and creating a sense of community and belonging. Kindness expects nothing in return, but why can't we feel good about ourselves anyway? Studies have also shown that both giving and receiving kindness can physically change the way we think, boosting our levels of serotonin and dopamine to give us feelings of happiness and fulfillment. In this way, we can think of kindness as a muscle to be exercised, where people can build up their compassion and desire to help others over time, making it easier and easier to be kind. If we could all just be kind in this way, we could have 23% less stress hormones, can age twice as slowly, and be more energetic and confident. Now, we all make mistakes, but it's how we respond to each other's faults that is the true test of our humanity. To anyone that says kindness is a sign of weakness, that it's a naive way to look at the world, or that it simply doesn't work, I say this: it takes tremendous strength and courage to be kind, but it's only by working together that we can enact real change. We now live in a society that has been irreversibly changed by a pandemic that has divided us. And yet, an experiment from the University of Sussex has seen that COVID has made the world kinder. Out of almost 60,000 people spanning 144 different nations, 2/3 believed that these events have made our species more compassionate, but that these acts of kindness were limited to the home or the workspaces and not the internet nor the streets. So what can change? It's been proven without a doubt that kindness has the power to cross borders, break barriers, and forge a universal understanding about what it means to be a better person through shared experiences. But we now need to extend this kindness further than ever before to help those we don't even know. Last week was Refugee Week, where we acknowledged just how people all over Europe have opened their homes to strangers fleeing war. What a generous act of kindness that was. And in the words of Amelia Earhart, who was the first female to fly the Atlantic Ocean solo, a single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up to make new trees. Now more than ever, we need the world to be more kind. But if we believe in the power of kindness, if we believe in the pursuit of happiness, and if we believe in the progress for common good, then we must also recognise that we collectively have the tools to meet these challenges we face in our society. And so, I urge you all to think about the acts of kindness you could spread to help your community, and just how easy it is to be kind and make a real difference. And remember, make your yawn a smile.
Well, there you go, an animated and heartfelt speech by one of our very own Rory McGrellis. I think you'll agree, Eliana, there's no better person to speak on the topic of kindness.
Definitely agree with you.
Yeah. We will now join Zoe, who is with Rory in the newsroom, to talk a little bit more about his speech.
Thanks so much, Ned. That truly was a heartwarming speech on the power of human kindness, Rory. Tell me, what inspired you to write and perform this speech?
Well, I mean, today's landscape, I think kindness is something that we're starting to forget. It kind of falls behind a little bit, and I just really wanted to bring it back to the surface, back into people's minds, and really get people talking about what it means to be kind and how easy it can be just to kind of make a huge difference.
That's fantastic. And can you remember an example where an act of kindness has made a difference in your life?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have been around a lot of kindness growing up, and I think it's really helped shape who I am today. But I guess most recent examples spring to mind is here in this course. I mean, we've all had to kind of, especially me, kind of put myself out there in a way I've never thought of doing it before, and I think how everyone has kind of responded to that and how we all respond to each other is a huge part of what keeps me going through this course.
It certainly is a fantastic bunch of people here at UEA Journalism. Got one more question for you, Rory. Can you give us your 3 top tips for creating a kinder world?
Oh, here we go then, I'll give it a go. So I would say that being kind or being truly kind means always being on the lookout for doing kind acts. You can't just be something you switch off and on. You have to be constantly thinking about how you can improve your own community and the world around you. And I think you can't really underemphasize how small generosity acts can really make a huge difference. I mean, it's not just grand gestures, it can be even the smallest of things. And I guess the third one, which I'm drawing again from my speech, is it all starts with a smile, and that is how you can start being kind.
That's fantastic. I do think the world would be a better place if everyone was just a little bit more kind. Thank you so much for that, Rory. We have a fantastic last speech for you here on World Speech Day. I'll hand back to the guys in the studio.
Thank you, Zoe and Rory, and really impressive with all of the body language that Rory got right there. Now, Professor Alan, we might get a little personal here. Could you please tell us a little bit about your most memorable act of kindness?
I could tell you about something that happened to me very recently that involves someone being very kind, although I'm slightly embarrassed to tell the story because it means admitting that I'm also an idiot sometimes. So I was in Sweden just 2-3 weeks ago for work, doing some work at a university there. Very busy, working on my laptop on the plane and on the train to finish everything I had to finish. And it wasn't until I got to the hotel where I was staying and went to unpack my bags that I realised I had left my computer on the train. Disaster, right?
Nightmare.
Disaster. Not only computer, expensive, important item, but with all my work on it. I had my phone, which was running out of power, didn't have my charger or anything with it because that was in the bag with the computer. Absolute panic, I can tell you. Trying to find out what to do, who to call, lost property, whatever. I got a charger from the people at the hotel, plugged in my phone to charge it up because it was really low on power to see who I could call, what I could do. And then I got an email from somebody who said, "Is this your bag?" They'd found my bag on the train, opened the computer, the login screen has my name on it. They Googled me, found me at the university, sent me an email and said, "Is this your computer?" I said, after saying, "Oh, thank you."
All thanks to
I said,
Google,
"Yes,
right?
thank you very much. How can I get it?" They were in a town about 10 miles away. They said, "Well, I'm coming into work in the place you're in tomorrow morning. I'll drop it off at your hotel at 7:30. Dropped it off at 7:30, and when I said, please let me thank you, they were like, "No, it's fine. I was passing. Have a nice trip."
Wow, what a
So
stroke
there you
of luck. Wow.
Yeah.
Should go to Sweden more
Let's
often.
hear it for Sweden, right?
Well, I did have the same experience as well, and that was when I lost my phone in the middle of the road, and someone was so kind that they just returned back to me when, even though they did not know who I am. So let's get back. For our final speech, we have something a little different. UEA student Susan Atiomo has written 2 poems. The first is inspired by the short but impactful speeches of Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
What are you going to do the next year, the next month, the next dawn? Is it all set, ready for the next step? We hope we're ready, and this journey will be steady. The birds are chirping. Hurry, we need to do this. The skies are clear. Don't worry. Eventually, everything will be bliss. Keep going, there's no time. Plans to be made, things to be done. Quick, quick, quick. Tick, tick, tick. It's not all set. Tick, tick, tick. We're not ready for the next step. The birds are chirping. The skies are clear. The sun is emerging. Laughter is in the air. What are we going to do in this moment, in this minute, in this second? It's hard to relax, breathe, to simply exist. Tomorrow will always come, but today will not persist after the next dawn.
Beautifully spoken by Susan Atiomo. Professor Allen, I was wondering if you could give us some insight into the use of poetry as a form of speech.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting that Susan chose to do a poem rather than a speech. We might think of poetry on the one hand, kind of artistic, creative, emotional words. It's very different from political speeches, which we think are a bit cynical, maybe instrumental. But both share a common root in the use of words to say things in ways that are unexpected, that can be powerful and that can move us. And I think the best political speeches have something of poetry about them. We've heard it today. They have rhythm in them that draws you in. They have powerful imagery. That can be really important. And poetry can absolutely be a way in which you can encapsulate a sensation or a moment or an image in a way that really defines things for people and can end up defining a historical event, a political event, or a personal feeling. Really important and clever use of language there.
Thank you, Anne. Well, let's hear another one then, shall we? In her second speech, Susan discusses the world as a whole and offers a poetic call to arms.
Imagine a world where our systems are sustainable, where the waste we produce is not detrimental to our survival, where the future generations will not bear the consequences of our past actions. Imagine a world where we hold ourselves accountable for the decisions we take, where our commitments are brought to reality and not faked, where both groups and individuals are actively involved in sustaining life on Earth for all our sake. So I ask you all one question. Why can't this be our world?
Well, some really beautiful and powerful words there, right? We will now hand over to Zoe, who is with Susan in our newsroom.
Thank you very much, Eliana. So I've got Susan here with me, and your poems were inspired by the work of Antonio Guterres. Can you tell me what you think makes his poems and speeches so powerful?
Well, I think what makes it powerful is that they're short, but they're meaningful and they evoke a lot of images. So as you're listening to them, it's almost like you're going on a journey. And I wanted to do the same thing with my poetry too.
That's fantastic. And your first poem was about appreciating life. Can you give me some tips for that?
Like I mentioned in the poem, it's just about taking each day as it comes, knowing that today will not last forever and tomorrow will always come. It's about understanding that, I guess, appreciating each minute, each second, like I mentioned in the poem, and just understanding that as life goes on, you can always take it step by step.
I think that's a very important thing to remember. And finally, how has being part of this process of World Speech Day, how's that been for you?
It's been exciting, it's been new, it's been something different, and I appreciate that because it really pushes you out of your comfort zone. I appreciate Beth too for convincing me to do this, and I really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Well, it's been fantastic to have you here with us. Thank you so much, Susan. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Well, that concludes the speeches for today. Alan, any particular moments that stood out for you?
Lots of moments, I've got to say, actually. And partly I should say thanks and congratulations to everyone who's put on the whole World Speech Day and produced this whole day of programming. It's quite amazing. So we're all involved in an important, impressive act of communication, aren't we, right now? But when it comes to the speeches, I'd say what's really fascinating to me is the way in which I think every single speech made a connection between something that was very personal and individual in the speaker's experience or where they were from or what they'd been doing. They made a connection between that and some very general, larger issue, maybe about politics and policy. In some cases, it was about how we should treat each other and how we should treat the planet. I think that's a really interesting thing to see because that's quite an important part of what a speech can do, show the connection between something very specific and singular and something very general and universal. And then that can reach out to people who listen to that speech who can then imagine themselves and their life and their situation and begin to think about how they would respond to the issue or the challenge that's being set to them.
Absolutely. I must say for myself, I was mightily impressed with some of the topics raised, and yeah, the sensitive nature of some of them. It was brave of some of these speakers to bring a personal element to these topics. What do you think makes a good speech then?
Well, I think it's partly that making that connection with people, but a speech above all has to be about ultimately the audience. If you're engaging in what I would call rhetoric, persuasive speech, you have to start by thinking, what do the people I'm talking to have to know? What do I need to explain to them? How can I put this in a way that's going to make sense to them? And that's quite difficult because you know, if you're speaking to a classroom of students, that's different to speaking to a room full of city councillors, to speaking to the United Nations. You've got different audiences that have different needs and expectations and maybe know different kinds of things about the thing that they're talking about. So you have to start by adapting to that and reaching out to them. And I think all the speeches that we had today did that in a good way. They explained what they were talking about. They gave us an example about a particular case of maybe a terrible thing that had happened to someone who'd been harmed because of their sexuality, or somebody's experience of someone being kind to them, or someone's experience of car traffic in Brunei, right? So we get to see that personal experience. That means we can understand a bit about that person, feel connected. But then they also, all of them reached out and gave us something to do. And that's really important, that they weren't just painting a nice picture for the sake of it, but we're saying to us, you know, you could write this letter or support this policy or make this argument or change how you look at social media, all these things. And that's a really important part of any speech.
Absolutely. I think all our speakers today, I'm sure you'll agree, would have captivated audiences with their words and their issues, of course, the topics that they were discussing. Eliana, any particular moments that you enjoyed from today's show?
Well, all of the speeches were so good to me, but apparently there was one that I found interested the most, which was the part that Rory ride the bike himself to report like how we do cycle on the normal streets of Norwich. So I felt that part to be really integrated. I felt like we can actually get more of the kind of how the speech wants to deliver the messages to us. So that's part of what I think. Oh, how about you, Ned?
Well, I want to know how Rory got that camera angle of his foot as he was riding the bike. That was quite impressive.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely have to be asking him about that afterwards.
That's a really interesting example because actually when you're making pieces as journalists and you're trying to communicate to audiences, okay, you're not making a speech, it's not quite the same, you're not trying to persuade people in that way, but you are trying to speak to people and you're trying to think about the best way to communicate the story and what happened to those people. And Rory's package was a really good example of that, wasn't it? Because immediately he puts you right there. He wants you to think about cycling in Norwich, so we have some film of Newmarket Road and someone cycling, but not just from a distance. We see him doing it while he's talking about it, so we can immediately feel what the issue he described. When he says, "Oh, there's only a cycle lane on one side," that's not an abstract point. You're seeing him doing it. So I think there are some things that journalists can learn from rhetoric and speech making about how to communicate what you're communicating as reporters and so forth. I don't know if you found that, if you've seen that before, but maybe there are some of these things you could learn from these speeches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly in a job like this, in presenting, I think all our speakers today showed excellent presentation skills, and I think those skills are, as you said, transferable from speeches into the field of journalism. I think that's a very interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole dimension we didn't talk about, really, isn't it? Because often I talk about speeches as words and arguments and so forth, and we could talk a lot more about. Lots of them had very good rhythms, and they used a lot of the famous rule of three that repeats and so forth. But actually, a speech doesn't quite work if you can't deliver it properly. Yeah? And it's quite difficult, I think, for these guys because they were delivering it to a camera, to an auto cue, so you haven't got an audience. that can make it, well, some people think the audience is what makes it hard.
Yeah.
But actually, I think having an audience, you've got some feeling that you're talking to people. I find it very difficult to talk to cameras, so I'm looking at you right now, not at the camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all had really good delivery, didn't they, in different ways. I think we started with Alexei, who was very good at saying several times, he said, "you." And he pointed at the audience, didn't he, in different kinds of ways. Yeah. Others had a more calm kind of delivery. They were quite slow and cautious, and some were quite energetic in their delivery, but they were all doing it in a way that means we can not just understand the words, but also get a sense of the feeling behind it. I found that was really impressive.
Yes.
I can't agree more with you on that, because like I found the way that they deliver their speech was so powerful and inspirational, as they use much of their body language, and then they use a lot of interactions with people, and that captivated me the most. I hope that I can still see more of the speeches like this in the future, because I think that kind of speeches can deliver well the message to everyone, and can actually call for actions, apparently.
Absolutely. You've got to think of it as a kind of, there's a little bit of drama to it, a little bit of acting, I think, as you deliver a speech. Sometimes the most important moment can be something that you don't say if you pause. It gives it a little bit of drama, draws people in, and then they hear the word that you deliver it a little bit differently. So I think using that, as well as sometimes getting louder and faster and saying it more dramatically, that might be the way you want to do it. So you've always got to think of it as a little play in a way, but maybe that's how when you're producing packages for news, you've got to also think about beginning, middle and end, and how you draw an audience in, and how you stand and present. Do they teach you how to do that sort of thing in journalism training? Do you get voice coaching and things like that?
Yes, well, they've certainly helped us with presentation skills.
Yeah.
That's been a key part. Hopefully, you've seen some of that reflected
Absolutely,
through us
no,
today.
you obviously know what you're doing. I can see that very clearly.
Professor
absolutely.
Allen, thank you very much. Yeah. Now that rounds up Norwich's broadcast World Speech Day 2023. We want to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers for your fantastic work, and thanks to Zoe, our lovely girl in the newsroom, and
I'm joined by our fantastic speakers from today's World Speech Day, as well as an amazing woman, Beth, who's been instrumental in the organisation of this year's World Speech Day. I think we can all agree it's been an incredible day. How have you found it, Susan?
Very interesting. It's really nice to be able to see everyone's speeches and just see the creative process behind everything.
Absolutely. And would you be interested in doing another speech again after this?
Maybe, we'll see.
Fantastic. I know we've all enjoyed it here. How about you, Mikolai?
I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have my speech prepared and shown to the public, and I think it's really important to practice and have this kind of things going on. So yeah, thank you so much.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mikolai. And finally, Beth, you've been a key part of making this whole World Speech Day come together. How has it been for you?
Well, I think, I'm incredibly proud of all the students and the great collaboration between broadcast journalism, future leaders, and the speakers itself. I must say, 2.5 weeks ago, you asked all, what are the names of the speakers and what are the speeches that are going to be about? And none of them had signed up. Nobody, they hadn't even sort of like trained. So I'm incredibly impressed that they took it on so quickly. And I think the great collaboration between broadcast journalism, the speakers, future leaders, I can't be prouder of all of you. So happy World Speech Day to everybody.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's been amazing. To everyone who's worked on this behind the team, it's certainly been a fantastic collaboration. A big thank you to our presenters as well, who have been fantastic. Everybody who has worked behind the scenes has worked their socks off. So it's really been a fantastic World Speech Day. The theme, Change for a Better World, and I really think the speeches today have demonstrated that. We've heard some incredible people, some very unexpected voices, and that concludes today's World Speech Day. Thank you so much for joining us here at UEA.
thank you to Zoe, and we'd just like to reiterate her words of thanks to the team behind the scenes for all their hard work. We truly wouldn't have been able to do this without you. And finally, a massive thank you to Alan. Thank you for your time today and your fascinating insights. Any final comments on the speeches?
Absolutely excellent speeches. Again, I commend everyone behind the scenes for all the different things they had to do, including bringing me coffee and biscuits.
That's the most important part, I'm sure.
That's all from us here at UEA. If you have missed or you want to rewatch any of the speeches, do go to YouTube and search for the keyword or hashtag World Speech Day 2023. Or you can have a look at our website at worldspeechday.com and ueajournalism.com. Bye bye and have a good evening.